thanks to Case for inviting me to speak on early education, which is often not always seen as part of the state education system. So I'm delighted that Melian and others invited me to speak today. I just wanted to look, if you move it straight on to the next one, I won't take long with many slides. When I was turning my mind to the title of rebooting education, where would I reboot to in regards to early education? I went to the period to about 1998 to 2008, where for once we genuinely had a government, I believe, that was putting early education as its fundamental priority rather than the balance shifting within childcare. But since 2008, things have become more muddled. And so just what I thought I would give an indication of is what we have learned in the period since 2008. And interestingly, while government is always talking about evidence-based policy, actually this was policy that then got justified by the evidence that came afterwards. If you recall, during the period of 1998 to 2008, we had the Sure Start initiative, we had neighborhood nursery initiatives to address the situation we have increasingly of childcare deserts, where the market is failing and children, particularly in disadvantaged areas, have less access to quality high education. And things have moved since then. But I think the evidence that has been developed since that period of time demonstrates that actually those were the right policies. SEED, for those of you who don't know, is the study of early education and development, which grew out of the earlier phase called EPI, the effective preschool primary education research. And what SEED has demonstrated is that high quality early education benefits all children throughout their lives, particularly those from lower social economic status areas. It also importantly demonstrates that early education isn't just about what happens in preschools, nurseries, and childminders. The seminal importance is that of the home learning environment, the provision that is provided for the child in the home and how the settings work with those families. The home learning environment, the evidence shows, is second only to maternal highest qualification level as the biggest impact on maths and literacy at the age of 11. So it doesn't matter how good your early education provision is, or even your primary school provision, the biggest two factors influencing that child's outcome by the age of 11 and on to 16, although secondary schools do have a bit of a say in that by the time they're 16, is the quality of the home learning environment and mother's maternal qualification levels. There also, interestingly, has been international recognition of the earliest foundation stage. England, particularly, the United Kingdom generally, was always seen as a bit of a backwater in terms of early education. Now, internationally, through the principles and values of the EYFS, we are recognized as a force in early education, and many countries come to us to find out more about how those principles and values can be applied. Interestingly, remember that we talked about quasi markets within the education, the compulsory school age education. In early years, we are more of a pure market with the private, voluntary, independent sector. And there is money to be made in nursery provision, and there are lots of organizations who make considerable profits, but they do so by operating in higher social economic status areas and increasing the differential between provision in wealthier areas and those in more disadvantaged, and those are at risk of getting worse because of current policies. I've put a link in the slides, and I'm sure that gets shared out to a really interesting radio program. It's quite old now, 2017, 2018. Professor Alison Wolfe looked at the twin track policy of early education and childcare. The program was called, slightly ironically, the Childcare Miracle, because what it evidenced was that actually trying to follow two policies of early education and childcare to allow parents to go out to work means you've had very little impact on either. Maternal employment rates have hardly moved, and the number of children reaching their good levels of development by the age of 5 has increased, but not massively over the period of time of this policy. The one thing I would ask where we do not need is another inquiry into the importance of the first 1,000 days from conception through to. It's my job to read these things, and they say exactly the same as the last one. John, do you just want to flick through the next slide just because it clicks through? These are just a random sample of the reports we've had in the last 10 years from various organizations talking about the importance of the first 1,000 days. We just need to implement policy to meet the recommendations from those. John, please. So my last slide, what needs to be done? I would say the government has made a good start. Bridget Phillipson has said that early years is her first priority. And for the first time, Stephen Morgan, in the role of the Minister of State, is the Minister of State for early education, not for childcare. If this is an articulation of the rebalancing away from childcare towards early education, then it is to be applauded. But obviously, there's a lot that's just in the title. They do need to work with the sector on policy development and implementation. All too often, and it echoes what has been said by previous presenters, there is a top-down approach, usually in our case from the Treasury. Announcements are made from the Treasury in terms of the number of free hours of eligible entitlement that children can benefit from, with no preparation whatsoever for the impact in terms of supply, capacity, workforce skills, etc. They've got to build from an asset-based community development perspective. Local authorities, with the new policy around the 3,000 primary school classes to be made into nurseries, they've got to do that with a knowledge about what the provision is in their early years provision already. There were damaging situations from Sure Start when new provision was just parachuted into areas with no consideration about what was there, and it didn't work with the sector. They do need to recognise that the home learning, the central importance of the home learning environment, and early education isn't just what happens in nurseries, preschools and childminders. Work with families in baby and toddler groups through health visiting circumstances, community venues, etc. Must keep the child and the family at the centre of policy. I'm hearing already local authority leads saying, great, if we can open up a nursery in our school, that will keep that rural primary school open. That is not the role, that is not a child-centred policy about what is best for children and families in those areas. We have a massive recruitment and retention challenge, similar to that's been said at the moment. DfE's own figures is to meet the expansion entitlements they want. We need at least another 40,000 trained members of staff, and currently we're losing huge numbers of experienced staff. So we need to value, reward, and respect early educators, and that's as much from David Bell. If you read the report that wasn't published but got shared with the TES, one of his recommendations was the issue of people getting their degrees in early education, the early years teacher status should have QTS, because that is the route to becoming, to having a solid career in early education. And finally, it's been mentioned already, but I just needed to put it in there, address and reframe the SEND landscape from early years through schools to further education. Recognising the important initial assessment and support that is done in early years is often overlooked, is never financially supported sufficiently, and needs to be put at the heart of anything which is around making sure we are making inclusive environments. Thank you, John. I think I'm done.